the 16th of each month, and we're joined by a snow ops professional from the industry to learn a little bit about the industry, trends in the industry, and what's going on within the space. I'm happy to be joined today by President and CEO of the Swinter Group and SG Advantage out of St. Louis, Missouri, Mr. Ken Bogman. So, Ken, thanks for joining me, and thanks for being a part of today's Snow Ops Live.
Oh, heck yeah. Happy to be here. This is great. Thanks very much for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're excited to get started. Ken and I were able to see each other a little bit at the Leadership Forum that SIMA hosted earlier this week. So I'm really excited to be finding some time to sit down with Ken to talk even more about trends in the industry and 6 quick questions on snow ops. So at the end of every episode, Ken, one of the traditions that we're starting out is how we asked the previous guest to give us a question for our next guest without even knowing who it is. So our last guest was JP Sineski. He left me with this question for you, and it's where we'll start today. What's your biggest struggle in snow operations, wherever you may be? Is it tech? Is it customers? Is it equipment? And what are those biggest? What are the impacts on service of those struggles?
Yeah, and oddly enough, I don't think it's any of those three. I mean, I would have to call it personnel. Tech, services, equipment. None of that matters if you don't have the butts in the seats. The actual people here to make things happen. And that's so hard. Whether it's field personnel, office staff, sales, account management. I mean, whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, that's the personnel management side of the business is something that is really, really hard and has been increasingly difficult the last few years as well. So at least for us, finding the right people and then getting them at the right spot in the organization has been our biggest challenge really from day one to now. It's something that we're actively trying to do better with every single day.
I think that makes sense. I think that's something that we hear all too often from our members is personnel and labor is something that makes it even more difficult to do this work. And I think that's where culture comes into play, and so does tech and some of the efficiency measures that come with that. And we'll jump into that in these next 2 questions. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in the snow industry, Ken, and how are they impacting day-to-day operations at the Swinter Group?
I think that's something that we've really seen. You talk about trends, right? So I've been at this coming on 3 decades now, and in the last 10 to 15 years, really we've seen a surgence happening in technological advances as well as just this overload of information that's coming at you from every direction. It's no longer as simple as you get yourself an account and go out and make the snow go away. You really have to become familiar with your insurance procurement because insurance is such a big deal. You've got your weather forecast management. Private meteorological services are reasonably priced now, and so your customers kind of finding asking, well, how many do you use and which ones? And so you got to know what that is. You have to be able to work a computer. You have to be able to do all of these other things that make the snow and ice management business so much more involved than it was 15 years ago. You have to be able to manage all of those different systems and processes to kind of keep up with what's happening in the outside world.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I know that tech has obviously been a big part of that. That's kind of what SG Advantage Group is there to do some solution of, if you will. And so let's talk a little bit about that. What new technologies, innovations are revolutionizing or making their way in the snow management industry, and how are they being adopted at the Swinter Group to ensure that your customers are being heard, being serviced correctly, but also back to your labor question, how's it impacting the labor pool that that you're actively engaging and trying to retain?
Sure. So I promised myself when I sat down before that I'm not going to turn this into a sales pitch for SG Advantage, and so I'm going to stay very general here. But I think that there's I've talked to a guy in Ohio last week, and he has to use 15 different apps when he goes out to do
Mm.
snow. There's and that's becoming a pretty common thing that we're hearing is that there's a lot of apps that you have to use, right? And they all function about the same way and they all do about the same thing and they're all hard to use and nobody likes doing it. but it's become a reality of the industry, right? So some things that we have identified here is we try to minimize the amount of different types of tech that we have to use, right? So you have to have different softwares for different things you're doing. But when you're looking at work that you're going to take on, you don't necessarily have to use that other app or that other technology unless you take that account, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's something where you can look for ways to streamline your workflow there. So if you have 5 or 6 or 10 different apps that you're using, you may look at the accounts that are associated with that and say, well, gosh, I might be able to eliminate this other application that my crew has to use if I eliminate that account. Does that make sense? You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into a scenario where you're completely over spread out over all of these different applications. If you don't have to, you may be able to even negotiate with those vendors that you're working for and say, hey, I'm not doing that. Here's how we work as a company. And oddly enough, you'll find that you may be able to see some victories there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think that what you're saying makes sense, and being nimble, being thoughtful, and really knowing who those partners are that you're signing up with is key to some of the some of the recipe, if you will, when it comes down to selecting a service partner and then understanding how you're going to work with them. So that makes sense. I appreciate that
Right.
insight.
Yeah.
And then with increasing awareness around sustainability, we see it and hear about it all the time. It really depends on your municipality or locale that you're working within. We've seen a lot of talk around this sustainability movement in the snow industry and how we're protecting our roadways, our waterways, and that's very important. But what is snow operations' role in this, and what are you seeing the industry do to adopt to this not only local need but customers-driven need?
Sure, sure, sure. So, sustainability has been a buzzword for a really long time. I mean, I remember going back, gosh, a couple of decades and hearing about LEED certification that was coming out and
Yeah.
things like that. Where less is more, right? So, gosh, we can't use as much chemical per application because it's bad for the environment. So instead, we're going to do 9 applications with less chemical each time, right? So there's things like that you can get into that ultimately all of that boils down to in our industry. Our job when it comes right down to it is keeping people from falling down,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? That is our bar, right? If we can keep people from falling down, we can prevent vehicles from sliding into each other. We're trying to limit damage, we're trying to limit injuries. That has to be our number one focus. So when you have a customer that says, you have an RFP that comes in and gosh, the only thing they want to use is urea because it's good for the environment, right? The only thing they want to use is potassium chloride. Okay, fine. Explain to your customers the other side of that fact. That ask, if you will. So
Sure.
they want to see this because somebody in their organization understood that if you use potassium chloride, it is going to be less corrosive than calcium chloride. Okay, fine. Explain how much more potassium chloride you have to apply to achieve the same results as one application of calcium. And when you start weighing that, now you realize you have roughly the same damage that's going to happen, right? Understanding your chemicals, understanding how they work, understand the limitations within them, and that sustainability is great, but you cannot sacrifice the safety aspect of what we're doing as a service provider for sustainability. Because yes, we might save a plant or we might save an animal, but if somebody slips and falls and dies, which happens all the time,
Mm-hmm.
that's now, is that worth it, right? And so understanding what they're asking for and becoming the expert that can explain the potential upsides or downsides of what that actually means is really important. And customers appreciate it when you can give them that information and that knowledge.
Yeah, very good points across the board there. How do we be sustainable, but how do we couple that with our main mission of keeping customers safe, keeping our customers safe in that
Did,
regard?
did you say
Yes.
the bean mission is in like beans and soup or like lima bean or is that bean? What mission was that?
Oh, that just being a part of our mission, being a part
Got
of our
it. Got it.
mission.
Okay.
Excuse me. I
Yeah,
wasn't
I,
enunciating quite well.
yeah, no, I'm thinking, I don't know what a bean mission is, but it sounds
Yeah.
tasty and I'm in. So let's roll. But anyway, all right. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah,
No fun acronym there, but maybe it's something we can get to work on by
maybe.
all means. I appreciate you double checking though for our listeners who either are listening to this now or will be listening to it in the future. But uh, it's a good segue though, the safety piece that you talk about because safety is something that our industry is passionate about. It's something that they put on the forefront due to the insurance struggles that we continue to see in the industry and the friction that we're continuing to be, faced with. We actually have a podcast coming out later this month about selling safety and how we sell some of that. So you're touching on some of these things. They're going to preface our podcast pretty well. But what are some of the most critical safety measures and best practices that snow professionals should prioritize to ensure that the safety of their team and clients is the top of hand?
So safety is such a in my opinion, an overused kind of buzzword. Even really, I mean, you see trucks driving down the road say safety first, and there's a bumper hanging off of it. The guy's texting while he's got a cigarette out the window. I mean, safety can't just be something that's written on the truck, right? That has to be something that is inherent in your organization, and that starts from your contract and your scope of work, and it moves into how you train your team and your staff, which then goes into how they execute their work, how they check the work, and the finished product that ultimately the customer winds up seeing when you're finished, with the
Mm-hmm.
snow removal services. So, and unfortunately, there's a direct correlation in our line of work with safety to dollar signs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
customers that have a bigger budget and are willing to pay more for work, like hospitals or emergency facilities, things like that have the budget to handle more of a zero tolerance type work. It's more expensive, but the end result is safer. Whereas you flip side of that, and you have maybe a gas station in the middle of nowhere that doesn't even have a budget, and kind of a guy shows up and plows every now and again when they can.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a significantly more unsafe environment than the hospital. And so we as professionals have to really understand what that means and the correlation between safety and dollar signs. And we have to be able to explain that to our customers. So when we get a request for proposal that doesn't have there's no de-icing in there, and it's a will call unless you get to 4 inches of snow. There's zero safety involved in that. That is a scope of work that is entirely based on dollar signs, not safety. And so we have to understand that if we take on that work and there's an incident, it still reflects on us as the service provider, because we knew when we read that scope that safety was a low priority. We
Mm-hmm.
still took on the work. We still accepted the responsibility of making that property safe. So understanding the correlation between safety and dollar signs is important, because when you explain that to your customer and say, we are a safety oriented industry, we're a safety oriented company, and I can't in good conscience be a service provider for a company that values dollars and cents over safety.
Sure.
Let's is there a way that we can work this out and find a way that we understand that? And if the customer says, no, pound sand, I don't have the budget for that, I need a 4-inch trigger. Okay, get it. That's fine. Then that's maybe not a good relationship between that particular customer and that vendor. They're not going to work out very well together. So I think that's a big deal, is recognizing that safety actually starts way earlier than when your crews are there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I think that it's a cultural, institutional piece, and really, it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's starting in the sales process, knowing what we're
100%.
selling and what we're signing in the contract negotiation process too.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. Nail on the head.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Ken, for joining us today. We're down to our last question here. We try to make this a short form back and forth for the folks listening online. I know we've got a few people on YouTube, a few people on LinkedIn. I know that we may be having some Facebook video feed problems, so we'll get this posted as soon as we can after the fact if we are. But final question. I listened to another podcast is where I got this idea from, where we ask a question from our current guest for our next guest. I've already got someone lined up for our September 16th show. He's in the Massachusetts area. That's the only that's the only giveaway I'll give you, a hint. But what question would you ask that person coming online with us?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to see what when you're hiring, right? So you're looking for people. How do you communicate your culture to that person? In the days where you can't ask personal questions and you got to be very careful in an interview process, how do you say to somebody, yeah, we're the whiskey comes out at 3, and it's a good time around here, or whatever it is that happens at your office. How do you communicate culture to potential new employees,
Hmm.
and then how do you enforce, how does that roll into with the rest of your team?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good question. I'm eager to ask that one. I think this individual will have a good answer for it. He may get a kick out of the whiskey remark there, but you're right. So Ken, thanks again for joining us. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who has been able to hop online with us today. If you have questions for Ken, would you mind sharing your maybe a contact information or website
Sure,
that
sure,
where
sure,
folks
sure.
could find you?
Yeah, you can find us at either Swinter Group, SWINTER Group.com, or SGAdvantage.com. Or you're welcome to shoot me an email, kenb@swintergroup.com. Or if you want to give me a call, 314-260-4352. Happy to jump in and talk to anybody that wants to talk.
I appreciate it so much, Ken, and I appreciate again you spending some time with us today on our second episode of Snow Ops Live. Something we hope to do again on the 16th of each month, unless the 16th falls on a Saturday or Sunday, and then we'll move some things around. But again, thanks again, Ken. I appreciate it, and you guys have a great weekend.
Yep. Thanks. See you.